Everybody, welcome. It is here. It is almost time. The football drought is almost over. So like manna from heaven, we're recording down and we are going to start our spring preview position series. We're going to be talking about storylines to watch, questions that we have specifically for each position for Florida State football before spring football starts. We are here, X's and O's, as always, presented by Knowles 24/7, Coach AB, Kevin Little, myself, Trey Rowland, everybody. We are ready to go. We're chomping at the bit because today we're going to be talking about the most important position in football. That is the quarterback position. And guys, if there's something that 2024 Florida State taught us, other than how much alcohol you could like safely consume without killing yourself, it's that if you mess up on the quarterback position, you got a lot of stuff that's going wrong for you. Agree or disagree?
No, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I was wanting to make sure you weren't going to go somewhere else first. No, I would agree with that. And, you can't mess up the quarterback position, especially if you mess up everything else around it. There was a lot of optimism about DJU. I can remember us sitting here having these conversations last year and presenting some levels of optimism with some concern, kind of behind it. But ultimately, I don't know if we ever were able to get a fair idea of what DJ was just because of everything that kind of went on with that team last year.
Mm-hmm.
The Kev's insides are trying not to spew out of him right now, but you've got to get it right. And here we are back-to-back years now with the transfer quarterback, and it seems like this is kind of the trend in college football. Your national champions just had a transfer last year. Maybe this is a growing trend of what we're going to see throughout college football of transfer quarterbacks leading teams every year. I don't know, but it's definitely a trend for Florida State, and we've got a new one now from BC.
And we've gone over so far on that trend. So I'd like to reverse the actual success result of that trend. Kev, if you want to, just go ahead and you can say I told you so for the Uyonglele stuff if you'd like. Just go ahead. If you like, if you want to spike the football, it's okay.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I made these series of videos last offseason, just doing this really deep dive into his film and his stats going into FSU. And my conclusion was essentially hey, he doesn't. It doesn't seem that great, but the stats don't match how poor his reputation is, I guess. And then at the beginning of the year, he didn't look very good, but then no one else looked very good. So the problems on that team were much bigger than quarterback, but a good quarterback can fix can band-aid a lot of problems, as we saw with Jordan Travis and essentially a very similar offensive line around him. So quarterback's important. They touch the ball every snap. They decide where the ball goes. They decide who gets the ball, and having a good one really makes a difference.
Yeah. So speaking of deep dives, if you guys have not been on Knowles247.com, I'm ashamed. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed as a YouTube father for you. You guys need to fix that out, subscribe, and get on the website. But if you haven't, Kev, you've been doing some deep dives on Thomas Castellanos, quarterback's new transfer quarterback from Boston College by way of UCF, familiar with Gus Malzahn, Florida State's new offensive coordinator. What have you seen, man? Are you getting some vibes that you got last year? Is it different? There's concerns. There's concerns around the actual stats, throwing ability. Athleticism's never been a concern. People are talking about durability, size. What do you think? So we're going to talk about some storylines to watch, questions that we have regarding the quarterback position. What's yours?
Yeah, so I'm gonna straight up say that there's some bias going into this conversation. I felt like all of DJU's career, he got the benefit of the doubt because of his stature, because of his build, because of how he looked, how he threw the ball, his arm strength, all of these kind of intangible things that you assume, all these old school, the scene in Moneyball when all the old, baseball coaches are talking about, this guy's got a, high school sweetheart. So that means he's going to be a good ball player,
the prototypical tools. You're saying we got a bunch of height-phobic football fans on this team.
Right. Castellanos is the opposite, right? He's not been given the benefit of the doubt. You could tell Bill O'Brien at Boston College just did not want to work with this kind of athlete at quarterback. It wasn't his ideal. I mean, FSU turned him down originally because of cited height concerns. And I think in general, he's proven people wrong. I think in general, he's been a better player. He's had to outperform the expectations of his stature, which means that I think he's been a better football player through his 2 years of a starting quarterback than DJU was through his 3 years that he had before he got to FSU. I have no doubt in my mind that I would take him 1-for-1 over DJU, no questions asked, despite the stature, actually because of him outperforming the expectations of his stature. So that's my bias. That's how I see it. I think people often overvalue physical traits with quarterbacks at the college level. I think it's important in the pro level when you're competing against 32 other teams and looking for the best of the best. But we saw it with Jordan Travis. You don't have to be 6'4". You don't have to have a cannon to be a successful college quarterback. I think so. I'm coming in with that. I kind of believe that, right? I believe that about quarterbacks. I believe that's the case. Castellanos is an interesting case. He was really solid after his freshman year, or after his first year starting at Boston College. Tons of rushing yards, tons of passing yards, had an offense built around him, was very successful. Then last year, he kind of didn't do as well. He started off okay, but then he got benched halfway through the season. There's this conversation about, is he, what is he like in the locker room? Like, he, what is
a lot of chatter.
Player,
he was
right?
getting square pegged in the round hole big time. Like he was getting fit in a place where he wasn't wanted, and where you could tell Bill O'Brien wants to work with the 6'3", 6'4", prototypical big armed.
The guy who's known for working with Tom Brady wants to work with Tom Brady.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Good luck at BC. But Kev, we saw some numbers fluctuate, and I think the main question that Florida State fans want to know, and it's going to be nuanced, but they want yes or no. In your opinion, and I'll ask the same question to you, Adam, is Thomas Castellanos good?
Yeah. So the numbers you're citing, he went from a top 50 QBR quarterback to like 111th in the country in QBR. So he kind of just fell off in this sophomore year. And actually, it's not because of his passing. His rushing proficiency went down from year over year. And I'm actually coming up with a video that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks, really diving into that a little bit more. But yeah, the question is, can he still be an effective runner? Because I think we've seen his ceiling as a passer, as maybe a top 75, top 50 passer in the country. He's never going to be elite in that category. He doesn't have the tools to be elite in that category. Can he be elite enough as a runner to make your offense work? And I think he can be. And for reasons that I'm going to get into in another video, I think there were some real flaws with how they built the offense around him at Boston College with Bill O'Brien that I do not think he's going to run into here.
Adam, what do you think? Same question to you. And it's interesting because when you look at like separate tools now, athleticism, rushing ability, really, really top notch for a quarterback, for any type of athlete. Like Florida State recruited him as just an athlete, not, you know what I mean? So like they think highly of that. The tools as a passer, not really anything that stands out to you. However, you can be an effective college quarterback, kind of like speaking of Kev's Moneyball, like a sum of the parts type situation. Like, does he have enough things that can make a defense worry to be effective? Is he a good quarterback in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't. It's hard not to be wishy-washy on these things and kind of straddle the fence. I think he's a good quarterback. No, I think he's a good. I think he's a good player at quarterback, but I don't know if he's a good quarterback.
Okay.
I
get what you mean. That's interesting.
Yeah, it kind of rolls along with what Kev was saying. As far as he's a guy that has proven he can be a dynamic runner when utilized in that fashion. And then there's been a lot of question marks surrounding last year. What happened to all the rushing yards? Where did all that rushing efficiency go to from the previous season? Specifically when we saw him run wild all over Florida State in their in the
every time they've ever played him. Like he really has had career games.
Specifically, though, I mean, he went absolutely ballistic against them up there in Chestnut Hill. It's got to be a part of his game, and I think that there's a reason why he targeted reuniting with Gus Malzahn, and why Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell in the Florida State football program targeted reuniting him with Gus Malzahn as well. I think that they know this is a guy who can add that element back to the offense that they lost with DJU last year, that they dearly missed from Jordan Travis. Just the sheer fear that these athletes put into a defense and defensive coordinators and defensive players, snap in and snap out of what they could potentially do, even though they may only run 3 or 4 times in a game. It's just the fear factor that they put into a defense. But I do think he throws the ball well enough, and I think he throws the ball well enough in areas that the Gus Malzahn offense kind of highlights, which is vertically. I mean, I think he pushes the ball vertically fine. I'm not saying it's elite. I'm not going to pretend that he's going to ever be the top quarterback in any of those areas as far as a thrower, but he does it well enough that he's going to give you an opportunity with these big towers that they went out and got at wide receiver, which we'll talk about, maybe next week sometime in a video like this one.
Yeah, who knows?
But they went out and got these kind of guys to be able to help him be a better passer.
Expand the catch radius, accuracy, like you said,
strength,
verticality, not bad. Probably a little bit unfairly maligned on like arm strength stuff. Accuracy, that is something. You got guys that are in that huge echelon with big long arms, like a bunch of Johnny Wilson clones. You expand the catch radius. I think, to expound upon both your points, something that they really missed last year to me, obviously everything that you guys touched, but man, that elusiveness in the pocket, man, like
buying time.
Yeah, like DJ held on to it too long and couldn't move, and Croman Hawk held onto the ball too long. Obviously, he's a true freshman thrown into a terrible situation. Like, just too many negatives. They got to eliminate the negatives and get this offense back on track.
Yeah, the numbers I ran to add to that are, I mean, the time to throw, the time to pressure last year and the year before were virtually identical. The offensive line, despite seeming like a huge weakness in 2024, in the passing game, wasn't much different than 2023. The difference was Jordan Travis was getting the ball out faster, and he was buying time when pressure was coming, and they did not have that last year.
That's a great point, and that's actually a pretty surprising statistic. One thing, so if I had a question, my question would be, we've established what we kind of think of him as a player overall. Do we think that level of player that we believe Thomas Castellanos is he good enough to like win you games at Florida State? Is he a game changer? Is he a game winner when the offense? I'm not even going to say when the running game's bad, because I don't really expect Florida State to be winning a ton of games when the running game is completely shut down at all. I don't think they have the team, the requisite amount of talent to do that. Right. But can Thomas Castellanos win you some coin flip games where you're only getting like 60, 70 yards on the ground, maybe something like that, like a mediocre rushing game? Is he a level of player that can win you that type of game, Adam?
I think he's a quarterback that the sum of all parts need to really work well to have the kind of success you need.
That sounds like a no. That sounds like he can't win without like a decent running game.
Well, I guess the question of win is, can he go beat Boston College? Probably. He probably can.
Okay.
I think I would have some confidence in that. But look, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I expect them to win 10 games this upcoming season either. So
sure.
It's, if you slapped him on Georgia, do I think he could go win you games? Yeah. Can he go win you games with the 2025 iteration of Florida State football? I don't know. It's tough to say because there's so many damn unknowns about this program right now.
There are. They put in so many new people. Just the performance of the offensive line. That's another thing. There's a lot of speculation. Hopefully, we'll get a couple more answers than we have right now in spring ball. But still, man. Maybe
if I could reframe it, can he be the piece at quarterback that you need to have a successful offense? I think that the answer is probably yes there.
Okay.
Because of his ability to open up the rushing aspect of the offense. Because of his ability to create a +1 dynamic to the run game, the defenses have got to respect. That should, in theory, help your offensive line. It should, in theory, help your running backs. It should, in theory, help your RPO game and your vertical passing game with the play action stuff. I think for what was out there and what they were trying to do, I think this was the right move at quarterback.
Gotcha.
Ultimately, they've got to do a better job coaching these guys up and getting them to play good football.
Right. Just with those potential ripple effects that you talked about, the story of his success in this Florida State offense isn't just going to be 100% in his numbers. It's not. You got him for a lot of the larger effects that it has on what you can do in other parts of the team. Kev, same question to you. Is this a guy that can maybe elevate the offense a little bit, or is Thomas Castellanos a guy that's going to drag down the pieces around him? I think I know how you feel, but I want to hear you expound.
Yeah, I mean, he's okay. So this is an interesting question. I think he's someone who raises the floor as someone who can add a +1 to your box, right? Like if you're losing the line of scrimmage, if your offensive line is struggling, him being a threat to pull the ball on a read option or being able to run these kind of triple option looks like you saw to Jordan Travis competently, him being able to flip out screens quickly to really lighten out the box, that buys you some yardage, that buys you some consistency, that buys you a game plan. It buys you an identity, which is something they were missing last year.
Great point.
If you get into one of these situations where a team can shut you down a person, right? You're playing Georgia, right? You're playing a team with an elite defensive line who doesn't need to bring that extra person in the box. That defensive end can play both running back and quarterback, no problem. I don't think he's going to make the elite throws downfield that would win that game, if that makes sense.
It does.
I think he buys you a floor. I think he buys you a game plan. I think he allows the offense to find some rhythm, find some success, get something out of nothing. And maybe against a better team, an outmatched team, he can use his legs a few times, like you saw with Jordan Travis, to elongate drives, to keep them in the game in a sense. But is he going to take a mediocre offense and lead him to an national? Is he going to win a Heisman? Is he going to be a Heisman candidate? I would say he's going to be a little short of that. I think he's someone who could compete to be on the All ACC team potentially if things play right, but like I don't see him being a piece that just elevates what they have to being an elite offense.
Right. If you're in a game where you either get completely overwhelmed from like a personnel standpoint, or if, let's just say, sometimes this Florida State coaching staff got whipped around by the pencil a little bit at some points last year. If you run into a team that has you with an elite defensive game plan where it said, we are going to effectively force Thomas Castellanos to make downfield difficult throws over and over and over again and bet that he can't, we're not seeing Florida State winning a majority of those games. Now, how many of those games are actually on your schedule? That's still,
and it's hard to do that, right? It's not easy to just say, I'm going to shut down the run on a good running team like that.
Not in college football. Not at all. No, it is not.
Right. Like Army, Navy had good seasons last year, and it did not matter how much you wanted to shut down the run,
there's a lot of proof of concept with Gus that he's going to get a good run game going no matter what.
True that. Adam, you had a very interesting question that kind of dovetails both into the durability question of Thomas Castellanos and then actually talking about some of the other quarterbacks that are on this roster, particularly one that's been here for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, as we sat down and we were kind of prepping for this, the conversation is all going to surround Thomas Castellanos, but I think there's a legitimate question. He's been injured. He's a guy that's gotten hurt, and if you're going to run your quarterback, you're going to risk getting them hurt. So, I just kind of thought, Brock Glenn is probably your 2 going into spring, and that's where the focus of this is. But is Brock Glenn a guy that can go run the Gus Malzahn offense? And if it's not him, then who can? That's behind these guys.
Can he?
So here's the thing. Like, I think Brock's getting a bad I think he's getting a bad rap. I think he's getting a bad rap. Yeah, I do.
I've seen a lot of positivity just for his decision to stay here at Florida State.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
isn't that like a backhanded compliment? Like, hey, thanks for
I
staying.
guess.
Like,
Well,
there's no like. We went from being super hyped about him after that Georgia game where he looked like he could throw the ball around a little bit and finally was progressing to like, oh, we need to go get a transfer quarterback because Brock Glenn can't play. Like, I just think that program last year was such a flipping mess. Like, I don't know if we've still gotten an actual evaluation of what Brock Glenn can be.
Okay.
And do I think he can run the offense? Yeah, he's shown that he can run the football some, right? I mean, he's shown that he can be a guy that you at least have to pay a little bit of attention to.
And he's willing to pull it. So, and he's more athletic than you would expect. He's no Castellanos, but
he's a guy that's willing to pull the trigger on RPO throws. He's a guy that's willing to pull the trigger on the ball down the field. Like, I just think he does enough stuff to be a guy that, you know, like if Thomas got hurt, that you could say, okay, he can go in here and we could plug him in and still be able to run what we want to do. Now, is he going to do it, especially running wise, to the level of Thomas? No, I don't think that's fair to assume. But maybe you pair him with, God forbid, they might actually run some Wildcat stuff this year as opposed to one snap of it a year ago. You know, you pair him with some of that stuff, or you pair him with a Trevor Jackson or a Kevin Sperry, who's another true freshman coming in this spring. You pair him with those guys and work some packages around them. Yeah, I mean, I think that you can make up for what you might lose in Thomas as a runner, but I still got some hope for Brock. Like, I do give him credit for sticking around. I mean, I do think that speaks some to his character to stick it out and say, okay, I'm going to try to prove myself. I don't know what his options were either way, to say, you know, like he had some opportunity to go somewhere else. It's not been pretty for him so far. But I would argue in the kid's sake, like, he's been dealt a shit hand. You get stuck in an ACC conference or an ACC championship game, then you got to go play Georgia with a roster that's depleted, and then you got to run out there behind DJ in that dog crap offensive line last year. Like,
worst running game in the country, man.
Yeah, I mean, hello, what a start to your career, buddy. So yeah, I don't know if his book has been written yet. I'm curious to see just kind of how he does. I'm anxious to see how he does. You know, if we get to see what his spring looks like, because I do think that there's still that ceiling in there that Brendan was hyping up over a year ago. Like, I think that's in there. That didn't just suddenly go away, in my opinion. So I'm curious to see if he can find it.
Yeah, Brendan was waving the Moxie flag big
time. Oh,
yeah. I still think that he.
I don't mean that as a shot. I mean, I think it was.
There was a reason why Brendan's at all the practices. There's a
Mm-hmm.
reason why. There is still. Yeah. We still think there's some untapped potential in there to frack out of him. Kev, what do you think? If Thomas goes down, Florida State completely screwed, or is it really? It'll look a little bit different, but you're not going to lose a ton in effectiveness.
Yeah, I mean, I think people overstate the necessity to be a huge run threat in Malzahn's offenses. He's had quarterbacks that you know aren't huge runners and still found success, still built good offenses. Especially if you look at Auburn. But Brock Glenn he looks like one of those molds of, you know, like a Sean White or whatever at Auburn. One of these guys that is dangerous enough with his feet that, you know, he can pull a read option or do whatever and kind of punish you. Yeah, you guys are right. Brock Glenn's passer rating so far at FSU is 45. Which is bad.
That's not QBR. That's passer rating, right?
That's passer rating.
Wow.
Bad. That's bad. And that it's not good. He has not had a good career so far. And AB's said it. He's had bad situations and he's been put into bad parts. And it feels like the staff has just kind of let him take all the crap work, right? And the same would be happening here, right? If Thomas Castellanos went down, he would have to take the crap work of the season.
Right.
He would
dirty jobs, dude. He's the micro of the team. He's just a dirty job, man.
That's
I
pretty
mean,
good.
I'm not huge in terms of like where I think Brock Glenn is going to be as a starter. I think there is a substantial drop off from Thomas Castellanos and what he brings to the table versus Brock Glenn, personally. But if I'm going to give some sort of optimistic look, it's that I think when you simplify things, you make things easier for Glenn. He's been more successful. So. That 45 passer rating jumps up to 106 when you look at just run pass options. And when you simplify it down to a one read, is this guy coming? I throw the ball. When you speed up his process, when you get the ball out of his hands, when you get him on the move with some of these triple option run pass options, he's shown a lot more success. And that is Gus Malzahn's offense as it stands right now. It is RPOs, 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 read options, zone reads. Like, it is all of these simple one read things that he's shown some success being able to run. There was a guy that came in late for UCF last year that showed some, he had a lot of moxie, you could say, and he showed a little resurgence for their team at that by the midpoint of the season. And I think there's a potential that he could be that. But
if
again,
called upon, yeah.
Again, he's one of those guys where I haven't seen it yet. And I think there's potential to be more successful in this offense than previous offenses. I think it's a little bit simpler in what it's trying to do. I think it gets the ball out of the quarterback's hands faster. I think the running game makes a little bit more sense competently, and the offensive line is going to be able to do those things more consistently around him. But the ceiling isn't the same for Brock Glenn as Thomas Castellanos as I see it right now. I hope he proves me wrong if he gets the chance.
Well, there you go. And as far as the final kind of storyline is who's going to be like the number 3, which of the young guys? You got true freshman Kevin Sperry coming in for the spring. You got Trevor Jackson, who a portion of the fan base like fell in love with last year, right?
Yeah.
Scout team sensation. That always happens in a really bad year. But the kid's got some legitimately tantalizing physical tools. We'll see if any of the young guys can distinguish themselves in this spring practice, man. It's a big time to get your name out there. As Florida State fans know, a lot of fun stuff at QB can happen during spring football. And we at Noles 24/7 are going to be there to cover it all. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to Noles247.com. Subscribe to this X's and Noles YouTube page. Subscribe to the Noles247.com YouTube page. Put all your notifications on. And we'll see you at the next one. Spring is almost here.
Spring has sprung.
Yeah, you spring that chop and don't stop.